I remember the exact moment everything began to rot. Not a big explosion, no screaming match, no broken dishes. Just an ordinary Tuesday, so normal it makes me sick now. Her name is Lauren. We met when we were kids. Everyone always said we were the perfect match, two halves of some big romantic puzzle. I believed them like a fool. For years, I thought we had built something real. Our home was filled with little fingerprints on the walls, half-finished art projects stuck to the fridge, toy cars scattered under the couch. Two beautiful kids who made my chest ache with pride every time I looked at them. I thought I was living the dream. I had no idea my wife was already somewhere else, mentally packing her bags and selling her soul for cheap thrills behind my back. It started with the smallest crack, so tiny I almost missed it. I woke up one morning and Lauren was already out of bed. Not in the kitchen making breakfast. Not on the patio sipping her coffee. She was sitting in her car, in the driveway with the engine running. Just sitting there, staring at the steering wheel like it held the answers to questions I didn't even know we were asking. I tapped the window. She jumped like I had pointed a gun at her, rolled down the glass and forced a smile so thin it practically ripped her face apart. Just needed some air, she said. I wanted to believe her. I told myself it was stress, maybe the kids, maybe work. I told myself anything that kept the walls standing a little longer. But then came the cold shoulders, the missed family dinners, the whispers over the phone when she thought I was too busy to notice. Every night she slid a little further away from me across the bed, until it felt like we were sleeping in different universes. I buried my suspicions for weeks, maybe months. But suspicion has a way of rotting inside you, turning every casual smile, every harmless joke, every late night into a question you can't answer. I started noticing how she looked in the mirror more, how she'd check her phone every 5 minutes and shove it under a cushion if I walked by. The real blow came by accident. I wasn't snooping. I wasn't even looking. One night, after putting the kids to bed, I went to grab her iPad to order some groceries. It opened right into her messages. Not locked, not hidden, like a trapdoor left swinging wide open, just daring me to step inside. The first message at the top wasn't even trying to be subtle. When can I see you again? Last night wasn't enough. I need more. I stared at it, the words swimming in front of my eyes. I clicked the thread. It wasn't just one message. It was a long, dirty love letter written across months. Photos, jokes, plans for weekends when she told me she was visiting her sister. Details about my own kids, that she shared with another man like they were prizes she had stolen from a carnival. I sat there, the iPad balanced on my lap, feeling like someone had scooped the insides out of me and left the hollow shell smiling at the screen. I kept scrolling, hands trembling, until I found something that ripped the floor from under me. A conversation about the kids. Him joking that they didn't even look like me. Her laughing. Thank God she had typed. Wouldn't want any reminders of him when I look at them. The room spun. My vision tunneled. I heard my own breathing, shallow and panicked, like a trapped animal. In that moment, everything, the house, the life, the memories, felt like a joke someone had been laughing at behind my back for years. I waited until she came downstairs, still drying her hair from a shower. She saw me sitting there, the iPad still glowing in my lap. For a second, she froze. Then something worse than guilt flashed in her eyes. Annoyance. Like I was an inconvenience. Really, Michael? She said, arms crossed, voice flat. Going through my stuff? How childish can you be? I stood up so fast the chair clattered backward. Who is he, Lauren? She rolled her eyes. Actually rolled her eyes like I was asking about some parking ticket. It doesn't matter, she said. You're being dramatic. Dramatic? I barked out a laugh so bitter it hurt my throat. You blew up our family for some nobody and I'm dramatic? She shrugged. A goddamn shrug, like we were arguing over what to order for dinner. You and I haven't been happy for a long time, she said, her voice syrupy sweet, like she was explaining it to a toddler. I deserve to be happy. I deserve to feel alive again. I wanted to scream, to tear the walls down, to shake her until she understood what she had done. But instead I asked the question that already had an answer. Are they mine? She hesitated, blinked, smirked. They're better off without you, she said. You were just a paycheck, Michael. You think you're some hero because you tucked them into bed? Newsflash, you're nothing. The world cracked open. Right there, in that quiet living room where my kids' toys were still scattered across the carpet, where family photos stared down at us from the walls, she smashed the final piece of my heart with one careless stomp. And somehow, I was only just getting started learning how deep the betrayal went. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't even sit still. I just paced the house like a ghost, stepping over toy trains and little pink socks, trying to make sense of a life that no longer belonged to me. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard her voice again, that cold final blow, you were just a paycheck. At 4 a.m, I made a decision. No more begging. No more asking. I was going to find out the truth, even if it tore me apart. First thing, I called in sick to work. Lauren didn't even bother asking where I was going when I left the house. She was on the phone when I walked out, laughing with someone. Probably him. Maybe arranging their next little getaway. I didn't care anymore. I had bigger battles to fight now. I drove straight to a private investigator's office. I didn't want some back alley amateur, I wanted the best. A guy named Rick, ex-military, reputation for digging out every dirty secret people thought they had buried 6 feet under. I slapped down the cash before he even finished explaining his fees. I want it all, I told him. I want to know who he is. I want to know how long. I want proof about the kids. Everything. Rick just nodded, eyes cold and professional. You're going to wish you never asked, buddy, he said. But I'll get you the truth. While Rick started pulling apart Lauren's secret life, I went to see a lawyer. I needed to know what kind of hell I was walking into. I sat there in a gray office with a woman named Sandra who didn't waste time with fake sympathy. You realize, she said, flipping through a thick family law book, if those children aren't biologically yours, you could sue her for paternity fraud. You could even recover child support you paid. But it's messy. It's brutal. And you're going to need DNA tests to even start. The thought of testing my kids made me want to vomit. They were my world. My blood or not, they were the best part of my life. But a cold, ruthless voice inside me, the same one she had awakened, whispered she used them as weapons. She lied about everything. You owe it to yourself to know. I spent 2 days gathering what I needed. Hair from their hairbrushes. A toothbrush. Tiny things that felt like stealing from my own children. Every time I touched their belongings, my chest caved in a little more. While I waited for the DNA results, Rick delivered the first wave of his findings. It hit harder than I expected. The man Lauren was cheating with wasn't some random nobody. It was my old high school friend. A guy named Brandon. Someone I had invited into my home for barbecues, for birthdays, for holidays. Someone who had played with my kids in our backyard, tossing footballs and pretending to be the cool Uncle Brandon they loved. I sat in my car in a gas station parking lot, flipping through the photos Rick had taken. Lauren and Brandon at a hotel. Lauren and Brandon kissing in my driveway while I was supposed to be at work. Lauren and Brandon taking my kids out for ice cream like they were their happy little family. Every photo was a knife. Every smile she gave him was one she had stolen from me. I felt something inside me harden, fossilize into something cold and unbreakable. No more second chances. No more bargaining. She had made her choice. Now it was my turn. The DNA results came back the next day. I knew before I even opened the envelope. Something in the way the nurse looked at me. Half pity, half dread. Gave it away. Neither child was mine. Not even close. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, the paper crumpling in my hands, feeling like I was watching the last pieces of my soul scatter in the wind. I had spent years loving, raising, protecting children that weren't even mine. I had given up nights, weekends, holidays, every piece of myself to be the father they deserved. And she had known. She had known every single second and let me live a lie. As I drove home, I realized the man who had left the house 3 days ago was already dead. A new man was coming home now. A man who would not be pitted, would not be mocked, would not be broken. When I pulled into the driveway, Lauren was sitting on the porch, sipping wine, phone in hand, laughing at something on the screen. She didn't even look up when I got out of the car. I walked up to her and dropped the DNA papers onto her lap. She glanced down lazily, then back up at me, her face unreadable. "So what?" she said, voice dripping poison. "You think you're gonna scare me with this?" I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. The storm was already gathering behind me and she had no idea how hard it was about to hit. And this was only the beginning. Lauren didn't even blink. She folded the DNA papers neatly like she was organizing a grocery list and set them beside her wine glass. No shame. No fear. No guilt. Just that same bitter, hollow smirk. "You think a piece of paper changes anything?" she said, swirling her wine lazily. "You're still not leaving. You're too weak. You always were." There it was. The real her. The version she had hidden for years behind fake smiles and crocodile tears. I stood there, staring at a woman I no longer recognized, wondering how I had ever fallen for someone so hollow. "I'm not staying," I said, voice low and calm in a way that scared even me. "I'm not weak. I'm just done." She scoffed, pushing herself up from the chair with an exaggerated sigh. She leaned close enough that I could smell the wine on her breath. "Good luck, Mike," she whispered mockingly. "You think any court's gonna side with you? You think anyone's gonna care? You're nobody. You're nothing. You always needed me more than I needed you." I wanted to laugh. I wanted to pick up her wine glass and smash it against the driveway just to wipe that smug look off her face. But I didn't. Because I had something better. "You're wrong," I said, stepping back. "You're the one who's about to lose everything." Before she could ask what I meant, I turned and walked away. Left her standing there with her wine and her lies, the queen of a crumbling castle she had built out of betrayal. The next morning, I filed the lawsuit. Paternity fraud. It hit her like a hammer. The first time she realized she wasn't in control anymore was when she got served at work. She called me 10 minutes later, voice shrieking through the phone so loud I had to hold it away from my ear. Threats, insults, wild promises that I would regret everything. I didn't say a word. I hung up. The news spread faster than I expected. Her family, her friends, our neighbors, they all found out. It didn't take long before whispers filled every corner of her perfect little world. The golden girl who had it all, who had the perfect marriage, perfect family. Now the center of a scandal so rotten no amount of makeup could cover it. Rick kept feeding me more. More proof. More photos. More lies she had spun like a spider weaving a web big enough to trap herself. Bank statements showing money she had siphoned into secret accounts. Hotel receipts from weekends she swore she was visiting her sick aunt. Even text messages laughing about how easy it was to fool me. I used every shred of it. My lawyer built a case so tight around her it was like a coffin. I wasn't just asking for divorce anymore. I was demanding full compensation. Every penny I had wasted on her. Every cent I had spent raising kids she lied about. Punitive damages. Pain and suffering. The works. Lauren tried to bluff at first. Acted like she could still charm her way out of it. Smiling sweetly in the first court meeting, batting her eyelashes like some helpless little flower. It didn't work. The judge saw through her the way I wished I had years ago. The evidence was a wrecking ball, smashing through every fake sob story she tried to tell. The real cracks started to show when her own lawyer pulled her aside during a break and I caught a glimpse of the panic in her eyes. The first real panic I had seen since this all started. For the first time, Lauren wasn't smirking. She wasn't mocking. She was drowning. And I stood there on the shoreline, watching her sink. But I wasn't done yet, because there was one final piece left. One final move that would shatter the last of her lies. The kids. She had used them as pawns, trophies, weapons against me. And now she was going to face the full weight of what she had done to them, too. I wasn't walking away quietly. Not anymore. The hardest part wasn't losing Lauren. It wasn't losing the house, the car, the empty promises. It was facing the two small souls who had called me dad their entire lives. Knowing the blood test had slammed a cruel, irreversible wedge between us. But the truth is, love isn't about blood. I raised them. I kissed their scraped knees, stayed up all night when they had fevers, built pillow forts in the living room. My heart refused to betray them, even if their mother already had. My lawyer, Sandra, was blunt. You have a choice, she said. You can fight for visitation rights as a step-parent figure, but it's going to be complicated. It's going to hurt, and she's going to use every dirty trick to paint you as a stranger. I didn't hesitate. I fight, I said. I fight for them, no matter what it costs. Lauren thought she still had the upper hand with the kids. Thought that even after the fraud, the lies, the humiliation, she could dangle them in front of me like carrots. She didn't realize I was no longer the desperate man begging for scraps at her table. The next hearing was about custody. She showed up in a tight gray dress, makeup perfect, hair curled just enough to look innocent. She clung to the kids like armor, like human shields against the truth pressing down on her. But the judge wasn't blind. He had seen the evidence, the betrayal, the manipulation, the documented emotional games. Sandra laid it all out in cold, brutal language. How Lauren had knowingly defrauded me for years. How she had dragged the children through lie after lie just to keep her double life going. Lauren's face changed as the minutes dragged on. The fake sweetness curdled into anger. Her eyes darted around the courtroom like she was looking for a door to slip out of. There was none. When it was her turn to speak, she exploded. Not tears, rage. He's nothing to them. She screamed, voice cracking. He's not even their father. He's a liar. A pathetic loser who clung to someone else's kids because he knew no one would ever want to have his. The whole courtroom fell into stunned silence. Even the kids flinched. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I just watched as Lauren finally tore her own mask off and revealed the venom underneath. The judge's face hardened. His voice, when he finally spoke, was as cold as iron. You may not realize it, Mrs. Reynolds, he said. But the only person hurting these children is you. The decision was swift and brutal. I was awarded visitation rights. She was ordered to attend parenting classes and undergo an evaluation for emotional manipulation. Lauren's world cracked open wider with every word the judge spoke. After court, she tried to corner me in the parking lot. No cameras, no lawyers, just her and me under the wide open sky. Her voice low and venomous. You think you've won, Mike? She hissed. You think they're going to choose you over me? You're nothing but a cheap replacement for what they really need. They'll forget you. They'll see you for what you are. A loser with no blood claim, no real power. You'll end up alone. I stared at her, feeling nothing but a hollow, frozen pity. She couldn't even see it. How small she had become. How pathetic her threats sounded now. You've already lost them, I said quietly. You just don't know it yet. She laughed. A wild, high-pitched sound that didn't belong to the woman I had once married. She got in her car and peeled out of the parking lot like a teenager throwing a tantrum. I stood there for a long time, letting the wind whip around me, feeling the chains she had wrapped around my life finally fall away. But deep inside, a storm was still brewing, because Lauren wasn't done fighting dirty. She was about to drag things even lower than I thought possible. And she was about to make a mistake so big, so irreversible, that even she wouldn't be able to laugh her way out of it. I should have known she wouldn't go quietly. Women like Lauren don't lose, they just change the rules of the game when they realize they're about to be checkmated. It started 2 weeks after the court ruling. I was settling into my new place. A small rental house on the edge of town, nothing fancy, but it was mine. I was making a life again from the ashes, piece by piece, starting with the days I had the kids. Those were the only moments I still felt like a human being. Then the letters started showing up. Anonymous complaints to Child Protective Services. Accusations that I was unstable, abusive, a danger to the children. One after another, like poison dripping from a leaky faucet. The first time a social worker showed up at my door, clipboard in hand, eyes scanning the modest little home I was desperately trying to turn into a safe haven. I thought it was some kind of sick joke. They inspected everything, interviewed the kids separately, checked the fridge, the bathroom cabinets, even the laundry hamper. They found nothing. They left apologetic but firm. They had to follow up on every report, no matter how obviously false. I didn't have to ask who was behind it. Lauren's fingerprints were all over it, messy, vindictive, desperate. But she wasn't finished. The next attack came straight through the kids. She started poisoning their minds during the days they spent with her. whispering things, filling their heads with lies too twisted for children to even understand. Your dad doesn't really love you. He's only spending time with you because the court forced him. He's going to forget you soon. At first, it was subtle. A little more distance when they hugged me. A few confused glances when I said I love you. But then it got worse. One night, after I tucked them into bed, my youngest, Lily, looked up at me with wide, scared eyes and asked, "Daddy, is it true you're not my real daddy anymore?" The question hit harder than any punch could. I knelt down beside her bed, heart breaking into 1,000 pieces, and pulled her tiny hand into mine. "I will always be your real daddy," I said, voice trembling. "No piece of paper, no lie, no one can change that. I love you more than anything in this world. You are mine forever, in every way that matters." She nodded, but I saw the doubt creeping in, the seeds Lauren had planted. Seeds of confusion, fear, insecurity. Seeds she watered with every lie she fed them. I realized then that this wasn't just about me and Lauren anymore. This wasn't just about revenge or winning some courtroom battle. This was a war for the very souls of my children. I had two choices. Let her slowly poison them until they didn't even recognize the love I had for them, or drag every single one of her lies into the light until there was nowhere left for her to hide. I chose the second. Rick and I dug deeper. We found proof that Lauren had been manipulating not just the kids, but also their schools, their doctors, creating a web of false concerns, setting me up to look like a negligent father. She had even gone so far as to forge an email from me to a teacher, pretending I was refusing to consent to medical care. Every lie was documented. Every false report tracked. Every malicious whisper recorded. It was enough to file a new motion in court. A motion that would change everything, a motion to strip Lauren of primary custody. The day she got served again, she stormed onto my property, shoving past the gate like a hurricane. Her face was red, eyes wild. She didn't even try to pretend anymore. "You son of a bitch," she spat, voice shaking. "You think you can take them away from me? You think some stupid papers are going to make them love you more than me?" I didn't answer. I just watched her unravel, calmly, coldly, the way she had watched me crumble months ago. "You're pathetic," she shrieked, stepping closer, jabbing a finger into my chest. "They're mine. You hear me? Mine. You're nothing to them. You never were. You're just a man who got tricked into raising someone else's kids. That's all you'll ever be." I leaned in just enough for her to hear me over her own ragged breathing. "They're not yours, Lauren," I said quietly. "Not anymore. You lost them the minute you used them as weapons." For the first time, something cracked in her eyes. Real fear. Real desperation. She realized in that moment that the power she had lorded over me, the control she had tightened around my throat for years, was slipping through her fingers faster than she could claw it back. I turned and walked back into the house, leaving her standing there screaming my name into the night. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about survival. This was about protecting the only good thing that had ever come out of a life she had tried so hard to ruin. And I was just getting started. The next court date felt different from the others. The air was heavier. Everyone moved slower, spoke quieter, like they sensed something brutal was about to happen and didn't want to be caught standing too close when it did. Lauren sat at her lawyer's table wearing a soft blue dress like she thought she could costume her way back into innocence. She kept glancing around, tapping her nails against the wood, looking for an ally she wasn't going to find. Her usual confidence was gone. What sat in its place was a brittle shell ready to crack wide open. My lawyer, Sandra, was calm and deadly as she laid everything out. The anonymous CPS calls. The forged emails. The manipulation. The deliberate, calculated emotional abuse of two innocent children just to get back at me. Piece by piece, she built a case so devastating that Lauren visibly shrank in her chair. Then came the recordings. Rick had been smart. He had installed a small recording device in a stuffed animal Lauren had sent back with the kids during one of their exchanges. Nothing illegal, my lawyer made sure it was all admissible. And what it caught was pure, unfiltered evil. Lauren, in her own voice, telling the kids that I didn't love them. That I was going to disappear. That they would be better off without me. You could hear my daughter crying in the background. You could hear my son asking why mommy was being mean about daddy. When the recording played in that silent courtroom, I didn't watch Lauren. I watched the judge. I watched the way his jaw tightened, the way his eyes narrowed, the way the pen in his hand snapped in half without him even noticing. When it ended, there was a long, brutal silence. Lauren's lawyer looked like he wanted to crawl under the table and disappear. Even he couldn't spin this disaster into anything but what it was. Finally, the judge spoke. His voice was like gravel scraping concrete. I have never, in my 25 years on this bench, seen such a flagrant, deliberate, heartless campaign to alienate children from a parent who clearly loves them. He wasn't done. I am awarding Mr. Reynolds full physical and legal custody, effective immediately. Mrs. Reynolds, you will have supervised visitation pending psychological evaluation and completion of a court-mandated parental responsibility program. Any further violations, any at all, and you will lose all visitation rights. The gavel hit the bench like a gunshot. Lauren sat frozen, her mouth hanging slightly open, her hands trembling on the table. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She didn't throw a tantrum. It was worse than that. She looked hollow. Empty. Like a puppet with its strings finally cut. As I walked out of that courtroom, papers in hand, my children waiting outside with a friend I trusted, I passed her. She didn't look at me. She didn't say my name. She just stared straight ahead, eyes wide and glassy, breathing in shallow, broken gasps. For years, I had been the one suffocating. Now she finally understood what it felt like. And I didn't feel guilty. Not even a little. When I got outside, I knelt down and pulled Lily and Ethan into my arms. I held them so tightly they squeaked in protest, but they hugged me right back, laughing, babbling about getting ice cream and going to the park. They didn't care about blood. They didn't care about DNA. They cared about who had been there. Who had stayed when it got hard? Who had never lied? Me. Lauren had thought she could destroy me. She had thought she could break me down until there was nothing left. But all she had done was burn herself to the ground while I walked out of the fire stronger than she ever imagined. And still, somehow, it wasn't completely over yet. Because there was one last truth left to reveal. The ugliest one of all. The one Lauren thought she had buried so deep it would never surface. She was wrong, I thought. After winning custody, after exposing every dirty lie Lauren had spun, that I had reached the bottom, that there were no more floors left to fall through. I was wrong. Started with a phone call, a number I didn't recognize, an older woman's voice on the other end, trembling but determined. Is this Michael Reynolds? She asked. Yes, I said, already bracing for the next hit. My name is Margaret Dawson, she said. I think we need to talk about Lauren. My stomach twisted. I didn't want to hear another word about Lauren. I wanted to erase her existence from my life entirely. But something in Margaret's voice made me listen. We agreed to meet at a small diner on the edge of town. She was already waiting when I arrived. A thin, weathered woman with sad eyes and a folder clutched tight against her chest like it might float her to safety if she started to drown. She didn't waste time. I'm Brandon's mother, she said. The man Lauren's been involved with. My fists clenched under the table, but I forced myself to stay still. There's something you need to know, she said, voice cracking. Something neither of them ever thought you'd find out. She slid the folder across the table. I opened it and my world tilted all over again. Photos, medical records, birth certificates, dates and signatures, all tying together a timeline I hadn't seen before but should have. Lauren and Brandon hadn't just been sneaking around for a few months. They hadn't just been having a reckless affair while I thought we were building a life together. They had been involved for over a decade. Since before my first child was even born. The kids weren't a random accident of betrayal. They were planned. Planned by Lauren and Brandon behind my back while I was stupidly saving up for cribs and painting nurseries. They had decided together that I would be the better provider. That I would be the stable, predictable fool who paid the bills, raised the children, gave them the appearance of a respectable life, while Brandon and Lauren lived out their dirty little fantasy on the side. I sat there, flipping through the pages Margaret had laid out, feeling every heartbeat like a hammer to my ribs. I didn't know, Margaret whispered. Not until recently. Brandon finally told me after everything blew up. He thought it was funny. He laughed about it. She started crying then, silent tears dripping into her coffee. I'm so sorry, she said. You didn't deserve this. I didn't answer. Couldn't. I drove home without remembering a single turn of the wheel. When I got there, the kids were playing in the backyard, chasing bubbles, shrieking with laughter. I stood at the window and watched them, hands pressed against the glass like a prisoner. They were innocent. They were blameless. They had no idea the depth of the cruelty that had shaped their very existence. I pressed my forehead against the glass and let the weight of it all finally crush me. Lauren had stolen everything. My trust, my marriage, my future. And now, the very foundation of what I thought my life had been built on, my children, was soaked in betrayal so deep it made my skin crawl. Later that night, when the kids were asleep, I sat alone in the dark and thought about how easy it would be to hate them. To push them away because every time I looked at them, I would see her lies staring back at me. But I couldn't. Because they were still mine. Not because of biology. Not because of paperwork. Because I had made them mine. With every bedtime story. Every scraped knee. Every whispered I love you in the dark. Blood is easy. Love is harder. And I chose love. Lauren would never understand that. Brandon would never understand that. But it didn't matter anymore. They had built their house of lies on quicksand. Now they were sinking in it. And for the first time in a long, long time, I realized I wasn't sinking with them. The first time I saw Lauren after learning the full truth, something inside me shifted permanently. It wasn't anger anymore. It wasn't grief. It was something colder, something sharper. A sense of finality. I had agreed to meet her only because the court ordered a transition meeting, supervised, to set the terms of her limited, supervised visits with the kids. It was supposed to be civil, procedural, bloodless. It didn't turn out that way. She showed up late, of course, acting like it was a casual coffee date, like the wreckage of our lives was nothing more than a small bump in her day. Tight jeans, sunglasses perched on her head, chewing gum with lazy indifference. When she walked into the room, she didn't even glance at the counselor sitting beside me. Her eyes locked onto mine with that same tired smirk I'd seen too many times before. "So," she said, dropping into the chair across from me like she owned the world. "How's Daddy of the Year doing without my kids to make him feel important?" The counselor cleared his throat, prepared to step in, but I raised my hand slightly, stopping him. I wanted her to keep talking. I wanted every word of her poison on record. "You know," Lauren said, leaning back, tossing her hair, "you can act all high and mighty now, but you were nothing without me. You still are. You needed me to feel like you had a family. You needed my kids to pretend you mattered. Admit it. My kids." Even after everything, she still called them hers. Like they were property. Like they were trophies. I sat perfectly still, letting the silence stretch between us until it was unbearable. I wanted her squirming in it, drowning in it. Finally, I spoke. "I know about Brandon," I said simply. "I know about all of it." Her smile twitched at the corners, faltered for just a split second before she forced it back into place. "You think that changes anything?" She sneered. "You think you're going to undo everything because you finally grew a spine?" I pulled out the folder Margaret had given me and slid it across the table. Lauren's hand hovered over it, hesitating. For the first time, real uncertainty flashed across her face. "Go ahead," I said. "Read it." She didn't. She didn't have to. She knew exactly what was inside. Instead, she shoved it back toward me and stood up, pacing the small room like a cornered animal. "You think you're better than me?" She snapped, voice rising. "You think you're some goddamn hero because you played house with someone else's kids?" "No," I said, my voice steady, cutting through her like a knife. "I'm better than you because I loved them without needing anything back. Because I stayed when it got hard. Because I didn't lie, cheat, or use them like weapons." She opened her mouth to fire back, but the counselor cut in, his voice firm, official. "Mrs. Reynolds," he said, "this behavior is being noted for the court. If you cannot conduct yourself appropriately, this meeting will be terminated." Lauren froze, rage practically vibrating off her. But she sat back down, jaw clenched so tight her teeth must have been cracking. We finished the meeting without another word between us. Terms were set. Supervised visits once a week. Strict oversight. Any deviation, and the visitation would be revoked. When we stood to leave, she tried one last desperate move. "You'll regret this, Mike," she hissed under her breath. "You think you've won, but you're going to rot alone. No one's coming to save you. I turned to her, locking eyes one final time. I don't need anyone to save me, I said. I already saved myself. And I walked out. No looking back. No hesitation. That night, after putting Lily and Ethan to bed, I sat on the porch alone, looking up at the stars. I thought about everything Lauren had taken from me, everything she had tried to destroy. And then I thought about everything she had failed to touch. My love for them. My ability to rebuild. My future. She had burned herself down to ash. And I was finally free of the smoke. But part of me knew Lauren wouldn't go quietly into the night. There was still one more move left in her. One final desperate attempt to claw her way back into relevance. I just didn't know yet how low she would sink to try it out. I should have expected it. Lauren was never the type to accept defeat. She didn't know how to lose, not gracefully, not quietly, and definitely not without trying to burn everything to the ground on her way down. It happened 3 weeks after the custody ruling. I was getting the kids ready for a weekend trip to the lake, something simple, something pure, something to remind them and myself that life didn't have to be a battlefield forever. I heard the knock on the door just as I was zipping up Lily's little pink suitcase. Heavy. Repetitive. Not friendly. When I opened the door, 2 police officers stood on the porch, grim-faced. "Mr. Reynolds?" one of them asked. "Yeah," I said cautiously, already feeling the familiar sinking feeling claw at my gut. "We need you to come with us. We have a warrant based on a report filed this morning." A report? Filed by Lauren? I didn't even have to ask. I could see it written all over their faces. False accusations. Again. Only this time she had gone nuclear. The report claimed that I had abducted the children, refused to return them after visitation, and was emotionally and physically abusive. It was a desperate Hail Mary, a last-ditch attempt to paint herself as the victim and me as some monster who had stolen her family away. The officers were professional. They didn't manhandle me, didn't treat me like a criminal. They followed the book, took statements, checked court documents. They saw quickly that nothing about Lauren's report made sense. But procedure was procedure. They still had to process it. Still had to go through the motions. For 3 hours I sat in a small, windowless room at the station explaining every detail, showing custody papers, showing the supervised visitation orders, showing every court ruling that backed me. Meanwhile, Lauren was outside the station, crying fake tears for the local news camera she had somehow called before the cops even knocked on my door. I watched the footage later, her trembling voice, her shaking hands clutching an old photo of the kids, her painted-on grief for the cameras. "All I want," she sobbed into the microphone, "is to have my babies safe at home with their real mother." Real mother. The words felt like acid in my veins. But the truth was already out there. The paperwork was solid. The court orders were clear. By the end of the day, not only was I released without charge, but Lauren was slapped with a contempt of court motion for filing a false police report and violating multiple custody agreements. The judge moved faster this time. There was no patience left for her games. Within 48 hours, Lauren's visitation rights were suspended indefinitely. No more weekly supervised visits. No more whispered lies during car rides. No more poison seeds planted in the kids' hearts. She was cut off. Completely. I didn't tell Lily and Ethan everything. They didn't need more pain, more confusion. I just told them that their mom needed time to fix some things, to work on herself, and that we were going to stick together and be strong no matter what. They nodded. They trusted me. They still trusted me. Lauren, meanwhile, disappeared from the public eye as fast as she had jumped into it. No more fake interviews. No more crocodile tears. No more desperate clinging to a narrative everyone now knew was a lie. She went quiet. But not out of acceptance. Out of necessity. She had been exposed so completely, so publicly, that there was nowhere left for her to run without tripping over her own lies. She had underestimated me. She thought I would break. She thought I would crawl. She thought I would collapse under the weight of her betrayal. But in the end, she was the only one buried by it. I sat in the living room late that night, a glass of water in my hand, the house dark except for the soft glow of the nightlights in the kids' rooms. I listened to their breathing down the hall, steady, peaceful, and I felt a calm settle over me that I hadn't known in years. Lauren's war was over, and she had lost, completely. But as I sat there, breathing in the silence, I knew there was still one last thing left to do. One last thread to cut before I was truly free. And I was ready. The final step wasn't about Lauren. It wasn't about revenge or anger or even justice anymore. It was about me. It was about the future I had fought so brutally to protect. I sat down at the kitchen table one quiet Sunday morning, a pen in my hand, paper spread in front of me. It was time to legally finalize something I had already known in my heart for years. I was filing for official adoption of Lily and Ethan. No more loopholes. No more biological arguments. No more room for Lauren or anyone else to twist the truth. They were my children, in every way that mattered, and I was going to make damn sure no one could ever touch that again. The process wasn't easy. Nothing about this journey ever had been. There were background checks, home studies, interviews. It was exhausting. It was invasive. It was brutal to relive every moment of the nightmare Lauren had dragged us through. But every time I thought about quitting, every time the paperwork or the bureaucracy made my hands shake with frustration, I thought about Lily's tiny hand clutching mine at bedtime. I thought about Ethan's face lighting up when I showed up to his soccer games. I thought about the trust they still placed in me even after all the lies that had tried to rip us apart. And I kept going. It took months. But finally, the court date arrived. This time, the courtroom wasn't cold and heavy. This time, it felt like a cathedral. Like something sacred was about to happen. Lily wore a little yellow dress. Ethan wore a clip-on tie he kept fiddling with. I wore the same suit I had worn to the custody hearings, but it felt different now. Lighter. Like I wasn't wearing armor anymore. The judge smiled warmly as she looked over the paperwork. "Is it your intention," she asked me, "to adopt these children and assume all the rights and responsibilities of a biological parent?" My voice didn't shake. Not even a little. "Yes," I said, without hesitation. She nodded, made a few quick notes, and then spoke the words that finally, completely set us free. "Congratulations, Mr. Reynolds. Lily and Ethan are now, legally and forever, your children." Lily squealed and threw her arms around my neck. Ethan shouted, "Dad," so loud the whole room laughed. And I held them both, burying my face in their hair, feeling something inside me heal so deeply that it almost hurt. When we walked out of that courthouse, the sun was shining. The sky was blue. It felt like the world was finally starting over. Lauren never showed up. Maybe she couldn't face it. Maybe she didn't care. Maybe she was too busy trying to piece together the ruins of the life she had burned to ash. It didn't matter anymore. She was a ghost now. An ugly shadow we had finally fully outrun. That night, we had pizza and ice cream for dinner. We stayed up way too late building pillow forts and telling silly stories and laughing until our stomachs hurt. And when I tucked them into bed, Lily whispered, half asleep, "I'm glad you're my real daddy." And I realized that despite everything, the betrayal, the lies, the heartbreak, I had won the only battle that ever truly mattered. I hadn't just survived Lauren's betrayal. I had built something stronger from its wreckage. Something real. Something pure. Something she could never touch. If anyone out there is reading this, sitting in the middle of their own wreckage, wondering if it's even possible to climb out, let me tell you, you can. You will. And one day, when the smoke clears, you'll realize you didn't lose anything worth keeping. You only lost the chains that were holding you down. I discovered the ultimate betrayal. My kids weren't even mine. My so-called wife lied, cheated, and humiliated me. I sued her for paternity fraud and shattered every lie she built. She thought she could destroy me. Now it's her world that's falling apart. And mine is finally beautifully free.